Talopa. Everybody's probably heard of Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, and
Yeah,
then
during my
Marpa was the
time.
guru of Milarepa, and everybody's
During my
heard the
time.
story of Milarepa where his
Yeah,
uncle cheated him, so he used black magic, and a roof caved on the family, and he created some bad karma for
how's
himself.
the
And Marpa
shift
said the only way you can
plus
get rid of
shifting
your sin or
speed?
your negative karma is to do good
Okay.
deeds. And Milarepa quickly changed his
Yeah,
ways,
welcome,
and he actually
welcome.
became enlightened in that same
Welcome
lifetime
everybody.
after doing a
We're
pretty
doing some
pretty
paint
negative
job
deed. And
here.
he's a
Whoa.
famous sage now. Everybody knows who Milarepa is, but there's these lineages, and they
So
keep coming back. And so one time where
we're
a
gonna fix
master is
this
teaching a student, the next
projection
lifetime
over
the student is the master,
the
and then the
door.
master is the student. And you have to really understand this stuff to and read the little subtleties, because they leave the subtleties, they leave the clues for us, but we
Just
usually miss them. And I think Nagarjuna was
kind of
also an
slow.
incarnation of Krishna, a plenary portion, and he was again a major Buddhist
If
reformer,
anybody knows
influenced
how
by the
to
Tara,
set the
um,
focus easier
went heavily into
in
emptiness and
Photoshop,
sunyata,
that would be
and because
great. Just
in
let me know.
typically in Buddhism there's no concept of God, and when Buddha was asked about God, he remained silent. But
Because
what
I
most
can't seem to
Buddhists fail to
set it
realize is
properly,
that
where
the whole
what it
dependent
orbits
origination
around.
and
So
emptiness and all of those teachings around that, which Nagarjuna, Tisha,
uh,
Wei Ning, all
it's
of these
just
people went
busy.
heavily
It's
into,
kind of weird
is
control.
when you not just understand emptiness as a concept, but you truly experience it,
Like,
you
yeah,
experience God.
I
Buddha
want
knew
that.
that the best way not to talk about God, but let these people find enlightenment and let them find God themselves, rather than, because at that time Hinduism had multitudes of gods, and he saw the silliness of deities in every house, and
I see. Now
so he kind of got rid of that and
it
focus on
orbits around
enlightenment, become enlightened,
somewhere
and
here.
then
I
you'll know
told you
that yourself. And I
different
think that's why
before,
he just
so I
remained
just
silent. So saying there's no source or
shoot.
creator
It also
um,
pivots like
in
this.
Buddhism
It's kind of
is
weird
crazy.
to me.
That's the Buddhist void is God. The
Now what can we
Taoist
do?
Tao is
Is it
God.
because
It's the
I'm
source of all things.
walking, sort
So
of?
it's
Or,
it's it's there in all religions.
I see. It's funny.
So where did Jesus get his spiritual
Maybe
foundation
that's the
from?
thing I
And
need.
the the,
Some
the first clue, I think, is the Essenes. And this is a mystical
Assyrians,
Jewish sect that lived along the west shore of the
sort
Dead
of.
Sea. They
Okay.
were also in some other cities, roughly 200 BC to 100 AD. Likely the authors of the Dead Sea
Oops.
Scrolls, which were found at Qumran in 1946. What was quite interesting,
So
the
let's
Nag
say
Hammadi texts were found, I think, in 1945, and the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in 1946. So just in a kind of 2 3 year period, we found some pretty important
is there a way,
documents
to
that kind of help
focus
us see
onto this
more into
one or something?
who Jesus really was and how much deeper his teachings really
Like in
were.
Maya, there is
They for
this in
they
Maya. There
all
is
acts of
this
anger.
thing
They
when you
forbade
press the
them.
F
It was
button
like
and it just
you they
focuses it,
they anger was a very toxic
focuses the
emotion that
camera
they
onto
didn't
it. So
participate in.
that's
Um,
for the object.
they're
So
saying people have said that John the Baptist, Mary, and Joseph were all influenced by the Essenes. So, because John the Baptist was already an enlightened holy man. How did he become enlightened before Jesus showed up
okay,
on the scene? And it was, I think, he found these hidden teachings again from the Essenes, and they were ascetics. They lived
okay.
spiritual lives. A lot of them were celibate. Um, they believed the soul was immortal and returns after death. So reincarnation was a reality to them, not some thing to fear like a lot of religions do now. They just believed it as part of reality. And the most important thing, Rex, is they prayed to the morning sun. And this raised a red flag for me right away, because remember I told you before, when you meditate and you do deep breathing techniques, the the physical body needs water, food, and air to survive. The spirit, the Buddha nature within, needs prana, and prana is like this chi force in nature. It's also called the vril. Like, I know the vril society has negative things, but the term vril really means chi,
Come on.
prana. It's the God force. It's what the soul needs. So deep breathing meditation techniques are so important, because when you ingest prana deep in, it's
That
going to the
much
Buddha nature.
sunlight.
So your soul needs prana. We need nature
Okay.
to survive. We need nature to be spiritual beings, and that's why All the Zen monasteries were located in these beautiful gardens and with nature all around. Buddha's enlightenment was in nature. Um, the Gnostics believed nature was a key to higher consciousness. Nature is very, very important. Nature is more important than timing and technique and a guru almost. Just sitting in
Is this
nature.
because of
Nature is very,
that
very
one?
important. And they knew this. And
But
why they do it in the morning sun is prana, the main source of prana
okay.
is from the sun.
Is it
And
in
then
the
it goes
center?
into life like trees and flowers and then comes
No,
back
not
out
at
through
all. I think.
blossoming flowers and trees. And when you've probably felt this before, Rex. If you live in Colorado now, right? If you ever been out in the mountains in the spring and you
Oh,
smell that
God.
fresh pine air and you get uplifted, you get a very strong up that you're breathing in prana. Your spirit is enjoying prana, not just the view and the that's nature. It's
Okay, it
the prana
seems
in
like
nature,
it's in
and it's
focus now.
most intense in the morning at sunrise. And these people prayed at sunrise in the morning, so they knew this. The Essenes knew all of this stuff, and it's very likely that Jesus was influenced by this group. And the Essenes were said to have
Whom are the
mystical teachings to help
Essenes?
sleeping souls awaken. They're not these mystical teachings aren't in the Dead Sea Scrolls though. So it was probably like secret pith instructions like Tibetan Buddhists have. They will only give you certain oral transmissions when they think you're ready. And these teachings are never written down. They're never written down. So you only get them when you're truly ready for them. So remember
else?
that.
Well, I was just sorry to interrupt, Sheldon. I was just going to say this is fascinating because what you described reminds me of when I read the book by Franz Barden, Initiation into Hermetics, and it's got so many applications that you can use mentally,
Okay.
physically, spiritually, and combine all three. But
Yeah,
you have to use, you
that's
have to
fine there.
practice. You can't just read it and be like, "Oh man, hey, abracadabra,
Save it up.
boom, there's my Ferrari." No, you have to actually learn these exercises. And actually, some of the exercises in there, he says it could take you lifetimes. You might not even get to this by the end of your life.
Yeah,
And a lot of this
that's
stuff
all.
you can read about, but unless you're ready, it's going to be like it's going to be study. It's not going to be something that you can actually do. So it's like the
Yeah.
universe has these firewalls in place that if somebody obtains this incredible knowledge, that could change the world in a sense, like could be used as some type of
Whoa.
destructive force. Well, the firewalls oftentimes won't allow that person to even use it that way because they just wouldn't understand it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And and a very important point as we go through the rest of my presentation is kind of why I sat on my teachings for 10 years and I had to have a near death experience and kind of be told that I'm supposed to teach it, um, was because I felt that I could see like this is when all this Galactic
Hey,
Federation of Light and the solar flash and all these internet memes that keep coming out. I could see
there
that
you
the
go.
spiritual community was still getting misled down all these rabbit holes all the time,
This
and they
one.
weren't probably ready for like a higher teaching because you can have a hard time with enlightenment. So I was worried that if I gave somebody a tool that made their path to enlightenment shorter, which is a positive thing, but if they weren't spiritually, their spiritual foundation, their spiritual house wasn't ready for it, it could create problems too. And so I kind of sat
You're
on it. I'm
telling
still
me
kind of reluctant with this teaching, like
that is actually true.
some of the stuff I know, because I really believe that this hidden
You
teaching
embark
that the
on
Essenes
these
had, the hidden
occult
teachings that
stuff,
Gnostics had,
and
the hidden
well,
teachings
yeah,
that was
these are
hidden in the
powerful.
Vedic stuff, and hidden teachings in the Buddhists and the Kalashakra Tantra.
They can,
If you've watched enough of my interviews now, they're
yeah,
not hidden
can screw up
anymore.
your life.
And like I'm saying that humbly, these teachings was known in our past, and it goes way past the times of these guys before Rama even. Because some of these megalithic structures that were built, like Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old, and that thing can be used to predict eclipses with very good high accuracy. They knew this stuff a long time ago. This goes back to Atlantean times, and I think it just trickled down into different groups, and then it became, as we went into the Dark Age, some of it became hidden, And I think some of it was suppressed by design, because the controllers of the world, the last thing they want is an enlightened planet, right? Like you have a bunch of blissed out people. It's the fear and all that stuff doesn't work anymore. It falls over. So after 3 years, Rex, I'm finally going to talk about the Nag Hammadi text. I know you wanted me to talk about this earlier. I just waited for a while though, because I wanted the viewers to really know that the Vedic and the Buddhist side of this first, because that's where my teaching came from. I was influenced more from Buddhist and Hindu, and Hindu philosophy and practice more than anything else. But the sad thing is, once I was able to attain that knowledge, it could easily look back into Gnostic and Christian thing and go, wow, Jesus was saying the same thing. It's all there. It's all the same. There's hardly any difference.
Yeah.
Well, let me jump in on that, because I've read the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and some of the scriptures in there I've read multitude of times. There's some great information, and some of the stuff though is so, like when Jesus is mocking. There's one scripture in the Nag Hammadi where Jesus is mocking other religious figures that were in the Old Testament and the New Testament of the King James Version Bible, or whatever version you can come up with since then. I mean, he's literally like making fun of him and stuff like that. And I think it's along the lines of, you got to remember, this is a translation where somebody had to translate these texts, and the context of the translation, not just the words, but the context of the verbiage can have a huge impact as well. So to read it today is going to have most likely a much different meaning than if you read it when it was actually put together. But it's fascinating how Jesus even says he wasn't crucified on the cross. He was laughing at the person that was being crucified, because that wasn't him. But it makes me think maybe in terminology it's being used. The reason he was saying that is he wasn't necessarily laughing at the person. He was laughing at the people that believed that actually had an impact on their soul, or on their, their livelihoods, because it's their own consciousness within them that can save them. That's just what went through my head at the moment. I don't know if that means anything.
Yeah. And another important thing to understand is there's some really cool stuff in these Gnostic Gospels, but you could read that entire library 40 times, live that way, try to do, because Gnosis means of wisdom. The wisdom mind is development of the wisdom mind is a central theme in Buddhism too. But you could read it 1,000 times, practice all of these different skeletal type meditation techniques, and 40 years down the road, you still won't be enlightened. These texts are missing the real golden key to enlightenment, and so is the Essene stuff. They were hidden. I think that they had it. I'm pretty sure that they had it. I know for a fact that Buddha had it, and I know for a fact that the authors in the higher priest caste in the ancient Vedic stuff knew it as well, and I can prove to you how they knew that. But in this stuff, it's not as cut and dry, and so it's really cool to look at. And I think if you understand, like I see myself as a dot connector. If you understand the whole picture, you'll be able to quickly connect these dots and see that they did know it. These hidden teachings of the Gnostics, they did know it. There was a lot of enlightened Gnostics around at that time, I believe. They did know it. It's just that we don't have those exact teachings. Maybe we'll dig up something else. And same with the teachings of Origen Adamanius. Cool stuff. It helps you understand that the similarities between Buddhism, but you can read that stuff all day long and all night long, and you're still not going to become enlightened from it. And that's just.
So have you noticed the Nag Hammadi also, many of the scriptures in there seem to be very sexist is the nice way to put it. I mean, big time. Where's the feminine aspect in many of these scriptures? It's not there.
Yeah. And then, the the Gospel of Thomas recognized the importance of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, but within the Nag Hammadi text, they don't really do that. So it's like, I think that's why some of that stuff was pulled out. Anything that the divine feminine has been knocked back, because in a dark age, it becomes very masculine, and I think that's why the divine feminine has been knocked back for so long, is because it's the other half of the picture, and when you keep some half of the picture out of balance or in the dark, you never have the equilibrium and the true what you really need to enter a golden age is to have the balance between the feminine and the masculine again. But it did reveal some deeper teachings. I can find these gems quite quickly, so I'm going to share them with you. It was 1945, so it was there was 13 codices, several missing gospels, like the Gospel of Thomas, I think, was the main find. But there's the Gospel of Truth, the Gospel of Judas, and they also had the full working works on Plato. So the Gnostics they had a complete teaching, but they were also great philosophers. They were recognizing Plato's philosophy. They were like a complete group. Like they were like Buddhist Christians almost. I'd like to call them. The similarities between Mahayana Buddhism and Gnostic is very compelling. I'd like to go into it a little bit more someday, and maybe even write a book on it. But I'm sort of in the process of unlearning now. I'm not that interested in study and things anymore. But it also has that hypostasis on the archons. The Gnostics were the ones who warned us about the archons. And why were these Gnostic gospels hidden? Like, I know the church didn't want to put them in as canon, and that's the reason some of these probably priests and stuff hid them. But there was a period where these people were being hunted down. Basically, everything was being shut down, and but they had a complete teaching and a philosophy. And
I would like to say, and I just gave a little glimpse in the Gnostic teachings and stuff like that, and I don't want to say all negative things, because I feel that out of all the scriptures that I've read, and I've read the Old Testament, the New Testament, I've read different versions of the Bible. I've read the Greek translation to English and certain texts that are presented in the New Testament. I've read through the what's it called, the Apocryphon of John, or the Secret Book of John as well. Many times in the Nag Hammadi, and I've read through the Sumerian tablets, and probably 150 Sumerian tablets that go back before Sumer, all the way to the Irada civilization about 28,000 years ago. And it seems like the Nag Hammadi, there's something unique. There's something real special about those scriptures. The information, especially when you read the Secret Book of John, and it breaks down each body part that has a specific name to an angelic deity or a demon. Actually, it talks about how 365 demons and angels made humans before the spirit went into the body, and 365 days is just like 365 days of the year. There's so much connections to the timelines. Yeah, I mean, I love the Nag Hammadi scriptures, and if anything, that was one of the most highly suppressed. Those texts were extremely suppressed. Almost all of them were destroyed. The Vatican and other religious institutions didn't want that information out to the public, because it shattered many of the paradigms that were presented by these institutions. So the Nag Hammadi is fascinating, and it would be great, Sheldon, is in the future we should really put some time in it. We'll put together one specific text, like the Secret Book of John, and we'll look at those names and decipher the names to the body parts of the demons and the angels. You know what it even says in the Secret Book of John? The mother of all demons. The mother of all demons. Guess what her name is?
Is it Sophia Aeon?
No, it's Matter.
Matter. I found that some of their stuff was quite interesting, and because the source of it's kind of unknown. They say it started around 100 to 200 AD, but there was, like, I think, proto-Gnostics, and I think that the proto-Gnostics were probably more tied to the Essenes. So that information, because there's, a lot of people say that Jesus went off to India, and the book, apparently Thomas, like, this is not, I don't have, like, don't take this as, this is just some people believe that Thomas went to India following the tracks of Jesus. He was trying to follow, and that during his lost years, Jesus was in India. He was called Isis, and that's the same name the Quran gives to Jesus is Isis. And there's a monastery where they said that he died at, and there, like there's Jesus went to, I think it was in Kashmir or something like that, and the teachings were very Buddhist-like. Jesus. It is possible that Jesus was a Buddhist teacher, or this knowledge was already a part of came from Zoroaster, from the Essenes, and then just Vedic influence for thousands of years. That information definitely permeated into the ancient Holy Land. So he might not have had to go to India to gain this higher wisdom or this higher teaching. I personally believe it was already there. The Essenes had it. I'm certain of it. This hidden teaching that the Essenes had, I think was some of the stuff that's in the Kala Chakra Tantra, and it goes way, 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 way back, to times of Atlantis, 20,000 years plus ago. So, and the early church tried to suppress the Gnostic teachings, and they took their sort of gospels and even edited them even more to kind of fit what they wanted. So there was heavily editing in the New Testament, and they believe in God, the monad, but they call him the monad, it's source of all. But they believe that the material world was created by a lesser being, and they called them these supreme beings. They called aeons, and an aeon is exactly the same thing as an avatar. And these are supreme beings and they appear in pairs. And so a good example is the Christ Sophia principle, or when Krishna came, there's Lakshmi. When Rama came, there was Sita. An equal counterpart that's played down in all religions. They still, Lakshmi is still considered very highly, and same with Sita in Hindu philosophy, but it was played down heavily. So the divine feminine side of, they're equal. When a Krishna appears, a Lakshmi appears. So when the last incarnation of the Kalki avatar, there will be an equal counterpart. A woman will appear at the same time. And but apparently Sophia came once without her partner, and a demiurge was created. So it can be a very negative thing sometimes. Maybe when you come in as a full vested avatar and your partner doesn't come, that's when this demiurge, which is the best example of the dark force or Satan or whatever you want to call it, was created at this time. And it might have not just been local to this planet. It could have been in the whole galaxy potentially. And apparently this demiurge felt alone, so it created materialism in some cohorts. And one of them was called archons. And the archons are here to help trap souls here longer. So they play all these games. That's why I said in the last one of our last interviews, if you had like a toxic member in your family or a toxic relationship in your past, those people could have been under the influence of archons. People who usually are lots of anger, maybe severe alcoholism, things like that. You can be more easily, or you're in constant fear, for example, you can be more influenced by archonic spirits, or what the Tibetans call mountain spirits. And so sometimes you might have something bad in your life all the time, and there's a reason for it. They're trying to hold you down. They can't get to you directly because you're full of light and you're bright and you're not fearful, but they go to a family member or a partner or whatever. So you kind of got to forgive all of that, because sometimes it's not really just the person doing it. They could actually be what you call demon possession in Christianity, where there's negative spirits come in. But apparently the Godhead or the Creator sends Christ or the Holy Spirit to help man achieve gnosis and return to God. So that's the reason why these avatars come, is they've got a mission. They've got to help other humans achieve gnosis, which is knowledge, supreme knowledge, so you can return to God. But part of that is attaining enlightenment. You can go out and get 15 PhDs. you haven't developed the wisdom mind yet. You've just got a bunch of degrees. Wisdom is something more. It's um, study is part of development of wisdom mind, but it also includes experiences, reading, being well read. There's many things that develop
landing pad
that
over
allow you to
here,
develop a
another
wisdom
one's
mind.
over here.
And I'll give in some examples in Vedic literature that'll help you understand why this is so important. The Gnostics really don't describe why gnosis or knowledge is so important into awakening, but if you look at the Hindu side, you'll really see why that is. And they believed Christ as a supreme being who incarnates and leads humans back to the light. That's what all avatars do. That's what all Taras do. That's what all Buddhas do. That's what Krishna did. That's what Rama did. And they believe that the material world trapped the soul within a body, and that this divine God spark or light can be liberated through gnosis, knowledge. But there's also within that knowledge is these secret teachings that allow you to liberate that, to liberate the spirit within. So, like Jesus said, keep your spirits up. He's talking about how you're going to liberate that light spark within. And you have to have knowledge and you have to have secret teachings to do that. And you have to have practice and you have to live and follow a higher path.
What I really
You
want
can't
to
be
do
a liar, a
actually
cheater,
is
a dirtbag, and still live this higher path, right? And they weren't so much concerned with sin. Ignorance was the big thing that they were concerned with, because an avatar can come in to a planetary system and kind of wipe the slate of sin and kind of cause a reset. But what happened after Jesus came? Everybody started sinning right the next day after he left, kind of thing. And we've been sinning. Christians have been sinning and doing just as many bad things as anybody else ever since. And the only way to truly change sin, which is really just karma, is immediately do good deeds in life. If you want to get on a different path, be like Milarepa, who used black magic to collapse a house on top of his uncle and kill him. He immediately changed his ways and only did good for the rest of his life, and studied the Dharma so he could help benefit other sentient beings. And he became enlightened in one lifetime. He's very close to nature too. He lived nature. He lived in nature. Um, so to the Gnostics, everything in the material world was evil, and the non-material spiritual world was good. And they just weren't concerned with sin like most Christians are. Like they dwell in it, like it's stop sinning. Sin and karma are intertwined. And the only way to salvation was to acquire this hidden knowledge. And this is what we don't have I don't believe in the Nag Hammadi text, is what was this hidden knowledge. I think it was like sacred pith instructions in Tibetan, like the sacred teachings that Buddha gave to the first Kalki king of Shambhala. It wasn't widely taught before, because this was all during the Dark Age, Rex. Remember on that wheel that I showed you before? We were in the Dark Age. It just wasn't time for Buddha to give his higher teachings of the Kalachakra Tantra to the world at large. And I hope it is now, because I think we came out of the Dark Age in 2012, right out of the Sandus period, and we're in Dwapara Yuga now. And dual mental virtue doubled. It went from 25 to 50%. We're still not at 100% yet, but 50 is better than 25. And I think that's the change everybody's feeling right now. There is more light. There is a change happening, and maybe now is the time to share these hidden teachings. So the Gospel of Thomas was written around 40 to 160 AD, so not too far after the passing of Jesus. And it's more Hindu and Buddhist in philosophy than it is Christianity. And can't really see this. I want to read the quote, but our little chat thing's in the way. But you can see that he has very similar quotes like Jesus, where he's saying that.
You want me to read the quote? You can't.
Yeah, you read them.
Okay,
I can't read the top one.
The top one. Okay, so it says, if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Yeah,
so you can see what he's saying right there is the God spark within. That's what you're bringing forth. The answers look within. It's within you. God is within you. and you've got to look within your own Buddha nature, your own nature, to save yourself. But if you're looking at the external world, materialism, religion, without the spirituality aspect, which most religions have become, it's going to destroy you. What's going to save you is within. All of the bling bling in the external world, the material world's not going to save anybody. So it's right there. Like it's the you can see these gems throughout the Gospel of Thomas. It's when you really understand the Vedic and the Buddhist side of things, these diamonds in these Nag Hammadi texts just stand out like sore thumbs. Are everywhere. It's pretty cool stuff, right? It's, you know, Jesus was a Zen master. You can just imagine the comments after saying that.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because I had a great guest on the show the other day, Dr. Richard Allen Miller. And speaking of somebody that's childlike and just so pure, he's 76. He fought in Vietnam. I'm sure he saved countless lives. And he's just so happy and so childlike. You know, I mean, his energy is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. So I'm glad you brought that up, because if anybody has that Buddha nature, you talk to him, he's like the Mad Hatter too, you know. And yeah. You, man, your energy is phenomenal, Sheldon. I really appreciate what you do. The fact that you spend so much time putting together these slides and the way you present them, and
is
What's that?
It's pretty cool stuff.
He is phenomenal, Sheldon. I really appreciate what you do. The fact that you spend so much time putting together these slides and the way you present them, and so fluid. That's why everybody loves you. I mean, this isn't something that the amount of time you put into this, you should make a lot of money for this, but you're not. I mean, you've got your book sells. I don't know how you're doing with that, but unless you're, you know, selling millions of books or tens of thousands of books, you're not making much money doing that. It's barely enough to cover your time. So I think that it says a lot about your character that you'll present this much, and you'll take this much time, and you'll put it on the screen like this, and as fluid as you do. And this goes back to a near-death experience you had?
Yeah.
Wow, man. Talk about that.
Well, it's I wrote the book in 2008. So in February 2008, about a week before, a friend of mine said, you should write a book, and on all of this, because she knew that I understood this to great depths, and she thought it would be helpful, but I wasn't awakened. It's like writing a cookbook and never cooking a meal, right? It's like, that's why I never wrote that book. It was like, so she finally convinced me to do it. So I sat down and I was writing War and Peace. Like, I was writing the biggest book that Buddhist, Taoist, Hindu book that the humanity was ever going to read. It was going to be like that thick. And about 3 days into writing this book, I was laying in bed one night having a dream that this meteor was coming, and it was really bright and strange colors. And all of a sudden something woke me up, and I looked out my window, and you can go on the internet and find this. On February 19th, 2008, this strange meteor went, and it landed somewhere down in Spokane, but I live in British Columbia. So, and it wasn't this normal meteor. It was all these weird colors and everything like that. And the very next day, I was driving to town to get some dog food, and I heard on the radio there's going to be a total lunar eclipse that night. And I was in the point of my book where I was going to try to explain the interplay between the mind, the body, and the Buddha nature. Right? Remember these three balls on a rope. And I was playing with soup cans, how to explain how they interplay and how one has to shift to become enlightened and all this stuff. And I just couldn't figure out how I was going to write this in my book. It was like, I couldn't, because it had to be done right so that somebody could understand it, right? And when I heard about this eclipse, I know in Tibetan and Chinese astronomers and Vedic astronomers, if two celestial events are happening back to back, it's significant. You're supposed to sit up and take notice. And I thought, well, geez, I just saw this freaky meteor the morning before. Now tonight, there's going to be a total lunar eclipse. I got to go out and watch this lunar eclipse, and maybe I can figure out how I'm going to explain this interplay between these three things. So I went out that night and watched the lunar eclipse, and things changed. The bliss came, and so I finished the book, and the book just shrunk down to way smaller than it was going to be, and but I still had the problem is, am I going to be releasing this information too soon? Because at that time, you know, there was people on the internet saying we don't need teachings anymore. The Galactic Federation of Light are coming with light beds to save us. Just all this kooky new age fluff that really you see out there all the time, which are the people who are trying to make money and stuff. Like I wrote my book not to make money. I wrote my book to help sentient beings. I do these presentations to help sentient beings. That you're the sentient beings, and hopefully it helps some people. I know it does, as I get really great letters from some of your viewers, people who bought the book or watched these shows, and they're very, very kind. Like I should start forward them to you. Like you'd be like, it's very touching, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart to people who send that stuff, because you lose faith sometimes, and when you get all these shills and people who are trying to throw you off and trying to downplay these teachings and the significance of them. But I still worried for a long time that it wasn't time to share these teachings. And so tick over to 2015, which is like almost 10 years later. I haven't promoted my book. I was trying to sell it for free for $1.08 on Amazon. And because 108 is the sacred number in Hinduism and Buddhism. They wouldn't let me, so I lowered it to the lowest price possible, and which is rounded about $3 or $4 or something like that. That's as low as you can sell an ebook. And I just had this belief that it will find the right people. Like I believe in destiny. When things need the wings, it'll find its wings and take off. And a few people contacted me over the years, but I really didn't do much about it. And then 2015, I had a blood clot. I have thick blood, and a blood clot went into my heart, and I died. I completely died. They barely got me back to life. And the thing that happened was, like I told you, the near death, leaving your body, kind of like astral traveling. And I was going back, I think, to the great center, way beyond the speed of light, like the speed of thought. I was like zooming out of here. And it was like I almost got there, and a voice said, "You got to go back and teach." And I remember the next day in intensive care, all these people crying around their other family members because these people are just about died, and I just about died too. And I'm just sitting there blissed out. And the thing that bothered me the most is I didn't make the effort to push this teaching because of my own fears that it was too soon. And hopefully it wasn't an archon that told me to come back and teach, because it still could be too soon. But I think that Shirak Tishra was right, that we really did leave full-on Kali Yuga in 1700, and then there was a 300 year Sandus period where the Kali Yuga and Dwapara Yuga sort of overlapped. And right at 2012, I think we came out and went into Dwapara Yuga. So I think the timing is right for this, but I still tell people, don't go try to do these final enlightenment steps if you're by yourself, or you have a lot of fear, or you're still not centered and your spiritual foundation isn't ready yet. Don't rush it, because it's the archons haven't left here yet. And one of your viewers wrote me once that she had awakened, and it was the same thing for her. Within minutes after her awakening, they showed up, and they try to throw you off. It doesn't last. It lasts as long as you. The dark night of the soul will last as long as you want it to last for. It can be over very quickly if you know what it is, and it's just the last trick they try to play on you, and then they can never touch you again. Like you're out of their realm. Like they won't even come near you. They won't even be in your house. They like negative influences won't be around after that. It's just.
That's awesome. Do you want me to read this second part now?
Sure, you can read it.
Okay. So Jesus said, "If those who lead you say to you, 'See, the kingdom is in the sky,' then the birds of the sky will precede you. If they say to you, 'It is in the sea,' then the fish will precede you. Rather, the kingdom is inside of you, and it is outside of you when you come to know yourself. Then you will become known, and you will realize that it is you who are the sons of the living Father. But if you will not know yourselves, you dwell in poverty, and it is you who are that poverty.
Yeah. This is again another really profound Buddhist-like, Taoist-like, Vedic-like statement is that the source is within, the God spark, the Buddha nature within is your connection to God, and that the kingdom is also outside you. Like people are always wondering about the kingdom. Have you ever really realized how beautiful this planet is? How beautiful, our mountains, our tropics are. Like the kingdom is already here.
Yeah, so we're
It's
getting
we're
there.
the ones not living like we should be and living within the kingdom. So when we all look within, instead of looking at external things,
Gonna do, I think.
we find God, we find our true nature again, we find enlightenment or moksha, and then the externals is not influencing you or distracting you anymore. He's talking about the looking within and finding your awakening to your own Buddha nature, your own Christ consciousness.
Where is
This is
Now,
great.
the other one is like so. I said there's three things that really highlight the Jesus' divinity and his greater teachings is Gospels of Mary Magdalene, which we only have fragments of and was heavily downplayed. I would love for the Vatican, or if they still got a copy, to give us a copy. And then there's this guy called Origen Adam Annius, and he lived 185 to 245. So again, only like 200 years after Jesus came, and he's probably the most important Christian theologian there ever lived. And I think he was a Gnostic. Like if you really look at what he was saying, and he even refers to Gnostic texts, he was a Gnostic, and that's why the Roman Catholic Church labeled him as a heretic, tortured him for 2 years. He died shortly after being tortured. But he said that Jesus came to teach us that one can be godlike in spirit by doing good deeds. And I don't know if it was Krishna or Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that said that we all can be godlike in our qualities, but we never can be godlike in quantity. So everybody's got to humble themselves. There's a lot of new ages out there that say they've reached the level of God. And Krishna was very careful to point that out, that we can we can be enlightened, we can develop a wisdom mind, we can be loving souls, we can be all these great things, but we can never be godlike in quantity, but we can be godlike in quality. If that makes sense. It's very important teaching there. We can be godlike in our qualities, but never. And Origen said the same thing.
So,
And he also said the soul comes back many times until it reaches a state of purity and is resurrected. Resurrection and reincarnation is the exact same thing. That's one of the biggest setbacks, I think, in monotheism, modern monotheism, is they failed to recognize that. And I keep wondering, like, I know it's a hard thing to understand, but I think it's by design, because if you can convince everybody that they're sinners and they've only got one kick at the can, so to speak, and then it's over for you, like, why do Kriya Yoga? Why follow a higher path? Why not just be a gluttonous pig and go for the material stuff, right? And I think that's part of the reason why is they don't want you to know that you're this infinite being, that you're a part of God. You're not separate from God. God is everything. It's everywhere. And they didn't really want you to see it that way. And I think that's probably why there was so much confusion there. And then man can return to God once this resurrection stops. And that is basically the same thing as parinirvana in Buddhism. You gain your halo, you shift your Christ consciousness, you become illuminated, and then you can go back. Or you can be like Jesus and say, I'm going to be a bodhisattva and come back and help again. That's what a bodhisattva is. So Tsongkhapa, all of these other guys I mentioned before, they're all bodhisattvas. And then when a Buddha comes again to deliver a new teaching, turns the Dharma wheel, and they go off to parinirvana and they never come back again. They're done with the reincarnation cycle. And the only proof in the Bible of reincarnation, and it's pretty clear too. And again, Christians will argue with this and dance around it, but
fence or some sort of wall.
Jesus' disciples said, "Well, where's Elijah? If you're the Messiah, where's Elijah? How come Elijah's not here?" And Jesus, you can clearly say, he goes, "If you believe," he says, like, you got to believe this. You probably won't, but if you believe, John the Baptist is Elijah returned. So he's telling them that John the Baptist is Elijah. And John the Baptist is the guy who recognizes Jesus' divinity right away when he went to baptize him in the river. And that the whole baptism thing comes from the Essenes. They did baptism in water long before Christians ever decided to do that. It's a part of like a purity ritual. You get clean and you kind of you ever go in water and you see how much it just, if you go into a river, it really does wash something away. You're centered again. Meditation in water is a really cool thing to do. Go sit in a river while it's flowing and look up at the sky and do a meditation in the water. And that's kind of part of the purification of baptism as well, comes from that. And so there's proof that there's reincarnation in Christian scripture, and Jesus was completely aware of it. And Origen said Jesus didn't become divine until after his awakening. So Jesus, what did he awaken to? He awakened to his Christ consciousness. And every Christian, every Buddhist, every person in the planet has the ability to awaken to their own Christ consciousness, but they have to perfect the technique, and they have to know this little celestial key, the key of David. This is the key of David, but it's celestial. It's not like a door key. It's a celestial key. Key of David. You ever heard in the Old Testament where it says the key of David will open one door so it never closes again, and closes the other door so it'll never open again?
Okay.
When you watch this celestial key and your Buddha nature sinks and you know the technique, the door to higher consciousness will be open, and that the bliss of enlightenment will be there, and that door can never close again. They're saying way more stuff in these scriptures than we could ever imagine, but we miss it. It's just full of these gems. I call them diamonds. Like, you can go diamond mining in all these ancient Essene texts and Coptic Christian texts and the Gnostic stuff, and they're full of diamonds. But you have to have that kind of bigger, expansive mind and have really understood, I think, Hinduism and Taoism and Buddhism, and you'll see it really easily. It just sticks out like a sore thumb. So his teachings were altered by Rome. They tortured him, and he died. But Origen Adamius was a very important Christian teacher.
Because
and then the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, we've only got fragments. But she said that Jesus came so that the soul might rediscover its own spiritual nature and return to a place of eternal rest beyond constraints, time, and matter. There is no better explanation in Christian literature of peri-nirvana than that right there. She's talking about attaining Buddhahood or Christhood and then going back to the Father. But you have to attain that before you leave. Otherwise, you just keep reincarnating. So if you really want to go back to God all the way, or go to another higher world, you got to do that. You got to be able to attain enlightenment or Christ consciousness in this lifetime, or no peri-nirvana for you. So it's so this divine feminine was suppressed, and I think that's why her gospel, we only have fragments of it. And it's referred to in the Gospel of Thomas, and maybe that's why Thomas got kicked off the team as well. The doubting Thomas was known for being the doubting Thomas. He had lots of doubt, but that's a good thing. Sometimes when you're on your path to a higher consciousness, having lots of doubt is a good thing, because then you're questioning everything, and you might make a couple of gurus go crazy, and they might kick you out of their ashram. But having doubt is a good thing at some point. If you still have doubt after you obtain enlightenment, something's wrong. But and then the Orthodox Church also had this term called podvig, where they say that the spirit hates sin, but the flesh and mind dwell in it, and it pulls us down to earth. So we're stuck in this reincarnation samsara cycle because of what the mind and what the flesh are doing, not what the spirit's doing. The spirit, and this is an important thing to understand about Zen. Because a lot of people talk about Zen in the West, but they don't understand that the traditional Rinzai and Soto Zen schools in Japan is not the Zen any Westerner is going to follow. It's very rigid. It's very religious. Like the things like koans, people have probably heard of koans. What happened in the early Zen schools in Japan was they got inundated with wealthy people who were making donations. You know, here's $100,000. Will you take my eldest son and teach him something? He's a teenager. He's a jackass. Try to teach him something. So they got flooded with all of these wealthy elite families coming into these monasteries. So they created things like koan and more rigid meditations and stuff like that. But the real essence of Zen is you got to go back to China, which is Chan Zen. And the guy whose name was Wayne Nang.
That is true, actually.
And I think he was the sixth patriarch of Zen. And he pointed the best master can point directly to the soul of humanity with the fewest words, the fewest scriptures, and that's what Zen was about. Zen is like a living flower that must emit its own fragrance. And it was him that said that the spirit within, the Buddha nature within, is fundamentally pure. So why do you need to sit around like a stone Buddha? And all your viewers, it's stone, like as rock stone. Everybody's saying stoned as in, Buddha. People can. When I say stone Buddha, I'm not saying like a high Buddha. It's just like a rock. You don't have to sit around like a rock in rigid meditations for decades. You don't have to sit there and purify something. And that's what a lot of monks have made the mistake, is spending too much time trying to purify something that was already pure. The God spark within all of us is already pure anyway. Our defilements are coming from the mind and the body, but the Buddha nature, your spirit within, is fundamentally pure. So you don't have to have this decades of purification. And then Buddhist monks can also take too much time in mind training. Development of a wisdom mind or gnosis is extremely important, but you can take too much time, and it has to be, you got to be a little bit more chill. Go into nature. Let your mind stop more naturally. Don't fight it. If you're fighting the mind with the mind, you're in a paradox. If you're doing skeletal meditations and trying to control your mind in your meditation, all of that stuff's not going to work for you. You got to be in nature, zen out, and chill. Like, take more time just listening to the birds sing, smelling, doing the deep breathing techniques, less time with mind training. This mind training thing went way too far in a lot of Buddhist sects. So all religions make mistakes. So I like to point out those mistakes so you don't make them. But I'll probably get trolled a bit too. So that's okay.
Trolls, just don't feed them too much. They can have a little bit, but
trolls don't bother me too much. So
they're okay.
Yeah. And they're
it's gonna be
in 4 years from now they might just think this is great. So everybody changes.
4 weeks they could change, especially with the knowledge you're dropping. Hello, Sheldon Moore, the legend.
So how to remove these archonic influences, and I believe that they come in more during the Dark Age. So that's why during the time of Jesus and Buddha, that was right in the height of the last Dark Age, and they were much more prevalent at that time. And that's probably why some of these teachings were suppressed, so they didn't have it. Padmasambhava, when he wrote the book of the Tibetan Book of the Living and the Dead, he was worried that they would get a hold of it and use it the